The head of Canada's top court is warning that distrust of the courts is on the rise. Chief Justice Richard Wagner tells Canadians not to take anything for granted.
There is no doubt that the rule of law and the judicial independence is under attack in many countries in the world.
That caution came as part of remarks in the Chief Justice's annual press conference yesterday, where he was asked about U.S. President Donald Trump's contentious relationship with parts of the American judiciary. The Chief Justice of Canada, Richard Wagner, joins me now. Chief Justice, it's good to see you. Thank you for being here, sir.
Good to see you.
I want to start with your comments from yesterday about the rule of law and judicial independence being under attack around the world, warning that Canadians need to be prudent to preserve their institutions and their judicial systems. Why did you feel the need to highlight this in your remarks?
Well, I've made those comments during my press conference, my annual press conference, and I was referring to comments made by many people across the country. You have to know that because it is our 150th anniversary at the Supreme Court, this year, 2025, me and my colleagues decided to visit 5 regions of Canada. And we started in Victoria, we went to Moncton, Thunder Bay, Yellowknife, and Sherbrooke in Quebec. The idea is to meet people, the general public, the students, high school students, the local media, and the local judiciary. The purpose is to inform the people on our work and how we do it, but at the same time to get their comments, right, to know more about their reality on the ground. And every time people were asking me the question, do you think that what's happening outside Canada could happen in Canada? And I said to them, because they see almost the collapse of important notions like judicial independence, the rule of law, l'état de droit, and they are concerned about that, whether it could come to Canada. And I said to them, you have a right to be concerned, you have a right to be anxious, but I think you should be also optimistic, because in Canada we have strong institutions that we have to protect, of course, but we have a good bench. We have good bar, we have good lawyers, good jurists, good universities, but we have impartial judges, independent judges. All judges in Canada are governed by ethical principles, right, which is very different in many other countries. So it's robust, and we should build on that. So they should be optimistic, in spite of what we see in many countries of the world.
I guess the challenge would be that it's not so much the integrity of the institutions that could be challenged by what is happening around the world, but the belief in the integrity of the institutions, confidence in the institutions, because populism is on the march. And whether our institutions are flawed in this country or not, they're vulnerable to doubt and a loss of faith.
Yeah, we realize that misinformation and disinformation are producing a lot of damages in Canada, elsewhere, of course, but in Canada. So the way to counterattack misinformation is to provide the right information, because people need to keep their trust in our institutions, and to keep their trust is to appreciate what we have. So we have to inform the people and the right information. So that's why at the Supreme Court, and I know for a fact that there are other courts in Canada who are doing the same thing, we try to provide and communicate directly with the public, using accessible language. For instance, in the case in brief, since I became chief, on one page we summarize what the court meant and said in a judgment of 100 pages. The annual press conference, as you know, the annual review, and we brought the Supreme Court the hearings in Winnipeg in 2019 and in Quebec City in 2022. And we're going to Halifax in 2027. The purpose is to bring the court to make sure that people understand how the court works, and I'm convinced that once the people know about the courts and the way we work, they will keep their faith in our institution.
Right. There is only a certain amount of outreach, though, you can do at the Supreme Court, of course, just because of, well, your day job, what you need to do. But, we've seen examples in Canada, the preemptive use of the notwithstanding clause, criticism of bail decisions and sentencing decisions from politicians and other actors. All of it sends a message to the public that courts can't be trusted sometimes, that legislatures and politicians need to act in advance because the system isn't working. So how do you guard against that sentiment, that the erosion of trust it could lead to?
That's why we have to defend the institutions. And that's a responsibility not only for the court, it's a responsibility for the media. It's a responsibility for the elected officials. And they have to take any opportunity to defend the institution and to provide the right information. We're not politicians. We have an obligation of reserve, an obligation de réserve. In other words, we cannot be on public sphere to discuss political issues. We cannot go and defend our decisions. It's up to the lawyers, the bar, the media, law professors, elected officials to give the proper information and support the trust of the population in our court. But the trust, could not be imposed. You have to merit the trust. And therefore, we have all a responsibility.
Right. And this is one of the challenges that, I'm going to presume that you face, because a lot of our institutions, they are constrained, right? As you talked about, the principle of restraint. I mean, there is a sense of ethics, legal, political, cultural norms that you can't enter the fray and push back and have political arguments. Like I mentioned, the preemptive use of the notwithstanding clause. That could end up in front of you, these sorts of legal cases that
It's
get you.
It's already
yes,
before the court.
yes, exactly. So, so how then, given those constraints and given the realities and the ethics of your profession, how do you do it? How do you, as a bench, as the top court in the land, push back against it? Or do you have to count on the other actors that you outlined?
Well, we have to count on the other actors, but we have also a responsibility to do our best within our jurisdiction. And I mentioned to you that the best way to do it is to open the court, to be transparent. We have nothing to hide. And as I mentioned, we have strong institutions in Canada. We're not a superpower in economics, in military, but in the rule of law, in the legal domain. I think that Canada is a superpower and has a lot to offer on the world scene. People refer to our jurisprudence. People refer to our way of dealing with cases in Canada. Civil law, we have civil law, common law, bilingualism. So we have so many assets that we should be proud of. And but it's finding any opportunity that we have to communicate and giving the right information. And I refer to the fact that on our decisions, every time a decision is released, we have a meeting with the journalist to explain to the media what does that mean. So to facilitate their task, to inform the public, and very often I find that the journalists have the same duty as a judge, as a trial judge in particular, the research for the truth, the real facts, and that's there are similarities. They are governed by ethical principles, the judges as well. So there are similarities that should bring also the media to make sure that all the institutions are protected.
We're also frequently criticized for the way we do our job, as people try to undermine the public faith in ours.
But that's my case.
But I do want to ask about that, because you did mention at the end of your prepared remarks yesterday, you thanked the journalists who cover legal issues and who are at your press conference. And I've been in these briefings at the Supreme Court, and they're extremely helpful for someone with a literature and a history degree walking into a nation-altering precedent, for example. But increasingly, there are fewer and fewer of us. Like, I've been at this 27 years now, and when I was in St. John's, I would cover provincial court. And I always felt if you want to know what's happening in your city, you go to the first appearance court in the criminal court circuit, because you see a lot and you learn a lot. That's not happening anymore. No. And so at that very entry point to the legal system, as bail is set, as sentences are decided, as evidence is heard, that is not getting communicated to the public the way it was 20 years ago. I mean, how does that factor into this, your concerns about the loss of faith in the judiciary?
It's a shame, and you are absolutely right. There was a time that there were journalists assigned to the Supreme Court on a daily basis. Same thing in other newspapers across the country. That's not the case anymore, because the traditional media, governed by ethical principles, on which we were counting, and we are still counting, to inform the public with the right information, is diminishing every year because of competition, because of financial resources, because of many reasons. And that's why we've decided to facilitate the task of the existing media, knowing very well that they are under pressure, that it's more difficult than 15 or 20 years ago. So that's why we facilitate their task in meeting with them in the morning. We can have also a lockup in very important cases. An hour before the judgment is released,
right.
the journalist can have access to the judgment, and then it is publicly released. All those measures are made to facilitate the task of and the job of the journalists, because we know that they are under pressure.
But there is this erosion of civic understanding, sort of a diminished public square, like controversies around bail and sentencing. People don't get the early introduction to the issues, right? Which makes it a challenging conversation to have as a country when you get the end result rather than the steps along the way to understand why we ended up where we've ended up.
Right. So I think that education is a good remedy, and that's why every time the court is going outside of Ottawa, we want to meet with high school students.
Right.
We've done it in Winnipeg when we sat in Winnipeg for a week, and we heard 2 cases. We met with the high school students, and we did the same thing in Quebec City. When I was presented as Chief Justice in 2017, 2018, I insisted in having in the courthouse at the Supreme Court 60 students, 30 from Quebec, 30 from Ontario, high school students, to come and learn and see how is it going in the Supreme Court. What does that mean? And so I really believe that we should start there. And education is a good tool, And at the CJC, which I preside, we will develop a program for high school students as well, to inform them as well. So there are many things that we can do, but I think it's if everybody, the media, the elected officials, the judges, would do their task, I think it would improve the situation.
Yeah, the openness, the accountability, and the transparency builds a societal resilience, right? Because when trust is lost, it's difficult to get back, and when there's frustration, it's difficult to maintain trust. And I know you've pointed out in the past, and just to end on a positive note of change, the shortage of judicial appointments, the slow pace of judicial appointments, so what that meant for delays and frustration of access to justice for the accused and for victims. But you signaled that has improved. I mean, what changes have you seen just in the pace of appointments and how that filters throughout the whole system? Oh,
for the last year and a half, there was a major improvement following, the sending of my letter to the Prime Minister. 75% of all the vacant positions have been filled. It's a big improvement, but it has to continue.
Sure.
And we'll make sure that it will continue, and I hope I will not be obliged to send another letter.
But the delays all filter up to the Supreme Court eventually, right? You get the end result of it all. Is it your sense from what you're hearing at other levels of the judicial system that it has made a difference, that things are moving faster?
No doubt about it. Yeah. We have to realize, and people don't realize, that one judge missing in one jurisdiction is terrible, because others have to take his place, or cases have to be postponed because there's so few resources. So every judge, every appointment is absolutely necessary, and it makes a difference when it is within a reasonable time.
Chief Justice, it's an important conversation. I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Thank you.